All right, let's talk about blood sugar. This is so important to understand if you're dealing with anxiety, panic attacks, stress, or just any health issue. You cannot be healthy without normal blood sugar levels. Let's dive straight into it. I want to keep this simple and as clear as possible. So ideally, your blood sugar levels are between 100 milligrams per deciliter and 80 milligrams per deciliter. Now this is if you test while fasted. So let's say first thing in the morning, this is the range you want to see your blood sugar levels in, or 2 hours after a meal. If it's still elevated after the meal, you're eating foods that are probably not a good choice for you. So what happens when you take in some carbohydrates and some sugars? It's converted into glucose in the bloodstream. Your blood sugar levels will be elevated. The body will release insulin from your pancreas. Now look at insulin like the key to the cells. So insulin comes along, it opens up the cell, glucose goes in and it's used as fuel. Now if you are eating high carbohydrate, high sugary diets, what happens is insulin keeps coming along and keeps opening up these cells. And if you want to imagine, eventually it starts to wear out the keyhole to open the cell. So the cells aren't opening, and this is known as insulin resistance. And what happens then is the glucose can't get into the cell. So you end up with high blood sugar levels, and this is what leads to type 2 diabetes. All right, so ideally what happens is blood sugar levels are raised, insulin comes along and puts the glucose into the cell, and it brings the blood sugar levels back down to normal. Again, going back to high carbohydrate diets, what can happen is if we're eating these type of diets for long periods of time, the body can start overshooting insulin. And if it overshoots insulin, it can lower the blood sugar levels too low. So there's too much sugar glucose being used as fuel, and your blood sugar levels will drop. So when the blood sugar levels drop, what happens is the adrenal glands will release cortisol. So cortisol, as we spoke before, is the stress hormone. It gets you out of dangerous situations. It's known as the flight-fight response. And what happens is cortisol also gets converted into glucose in the bloodstream to give you fuel to escape. But if your blood sugar levels are dropped through nutrition and diet, same thing. The body will release cortisol so they can bump it back up again. Because that's an emergency. It's not good to be at low blood sugar levels. The body can't function properly. A lot of symptoms are brain fog and being sluggish and just not always there and very low energy. Now, if your adrenals are functioning properly, it'll pull up the blood sugar and bring you back to normal again. If you're dealing with high stress, panic attacks, anxiety, a lot of stuff we talk about on this channel, you're most likely dealing with some sort of adrenal dysfunction. So the most important part of recovering from any type of illness is having healthy adrenal glands, and the first step you can do is dial in your nutrition. Move away from the high carbohydrate diets, go onto a lower carb diet so that the body then doesn't have to deal with these big spikes of insulin. And if you do have low blood sugar, which is a direct indication that you're dealing with adrenal dysfunction, they say roughly around 50 to 100 grams of active carbs a day is a great way just to kind of help the adrenals out and keep the blood sugar levels up. So you do need to support the adrenals with some extra carbs if you are dealing with adrenal dysfunction, so panic attacks, high anxiety, etc. If you're not dealing with anything like that, just keep the carbs to a minimum unless you're working out. On those workout days, feel free to load up on the carbs because you're going to use them up. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions, shoot them in the comments below.